Now, Boyd Matheson, Republican strategist and former chief of staff for Senator Mike Lee. He's also the host of Inside Sources on KSL. Let's start there, Boyd, with the former president's refusal to show up once again. He also hasn't signed the pledge that he would support whoever becomes the nominee if it's not him. He's way ahead in the polls, so I think we understand the reason why he doesn't think he has to be there. But what message does that send not only to the Republican Party, but also to people who are wanting to tune in and hear how he faces off against some of these candidates, and the message it also sends to them?
Yeah, I think it's really important, Marni, and I think it's going to become more important, especially in light of the results we saw yesterday with Republicans having an awful night, even in places where they should have done very well. And I think what that is demonstrating is that someone has to make the case, and whether it's a Tim Scott or a Nikki Haley or a Ron DeSantis, who can make the case and say, look, the Republican policies propelled Donald Trump to the presidency and kept things going, kept the economy rolling along. But right now it's all running on fumes, and those fumes are running out. And when you look at the legal challenges that the former president is dealing with, that's going to continue to wane. And so we saw this yesterday, and it will be interesting to see if any of the candidates make the connection of these dots tonight and say, look, weary voters don't show up. Exhausted voters find excuses to stay home on election night. And we saw that on Tuesday. And so someone has to make the case and say, yes, the former president can have a big rally tonight, not too far from here, but that is not going to win us the White House, nor is that going to change the trajectory of the country. And so someone's going to have to say, look, we have to get back to principles and policy. And that requires you to be on the debate stage to actually have the conversation. Because otherwise, as you said, Marni, it will continue to be the former president way out in front, everyone else kind of muddled in the middle there. And that will be the real test, I think, to see who can change that dynamic and conversation tonight.
Yeah, does it come back to bite him in the end in the general if he becomes the nominee? I'm just curious, looking back historically, I mean, we've never had a president like Donald Trump. We've never had a candidate like Donald Trump. Has there been a candidate who's trying to vie for office that hasn't shown up to debates quite like we're seeing now that you can recall?
Yes, it's the current occupant of the White House, Joe Biden. Did it during, it was a pandemic, so it was a little bit different, but he kind of stayed out of the way and laid low and was able to ride that through. I don't think that former President Trump is going to be able to do quite the same thing in this. And so that will be a really interesting test. You have to show up. You have to demonstrate to voters that you're serious about having the conversation, especially when voters are really weary and they're really exhausted by a lot of things. Currently, the best thing that former President Trump has going for him is that Joe Biden is in the White House. And currently the best thing that's going for the Joe Biden campaign is that the front runner for the Republicans is Donald Trump. And they're sort of propping each other up because it's causing voters to be resigned, wearily resigned to this idea of lesser of two evils kind of vote. But I don't think that's going to be sustainable. And I'm watching for that tonight in this particular debate is, can anyone change that conversation and say, look, if we're going to move the country forward, we have to get beyond the personalities. We have to get beyond the exhaustions and the antics and all of the polarization. And here's my plan to do that based on principles and policies. And again, if I were advising a candidate tonight on the stage, I would connect the dots to what happened yesterday. That was a bad night for Republicans last night. And a lot of it, I think you could tie directly to the antics and the exhaustion coming out of the Donald Trump camp. So if they can use that and then pivot to their own message and their own vision of moving forward, obviously Nikki Haley has an interesting space. She'll be more in that front runner. She'll take a lot of slings and arrows tonight. But it also shows you, Marni, how world events can shape and change the dynamics of races in significant ways. The fact that we are just 30 days from October 7th and the horrific Hamas attack on Israel puts Nikki Haley's differentiators front and center in terms of her experience at the UN. It's something that she has on that stage that no one else has. So then can she parlay that into a movement and a message that she can invite the American people to become part of? That'll be her test tonight.
Right, her foreign policy and her experience on that front. Haley's campaign manager called Ron DeSantis a sinking ship. Do you expect that she's going to try to take aim at him tonight?
My guess is you will hear a reference to Governor DeSantis's boots at some point in the program tonight. And that will be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what Governor DeSantis does and what Nikki Haley does. If they kind of train their fire on each other, I don't think that's a good strategy for either of them, by the way. They can do that because they are kind of the second tier front runners and going after each other. But I think they need to be very careful about that. Nikki Haley rose because she focused on policy. Governor DeSantis got off to a good start because of policy and what he had done in Florida. And I think if they get distracted and focus too much at trying to take each other out, they'll both lose their message in the process. And that creates space for a Chris Christie or even a Tim Scott to have a different kind of night tonight.
Well, there are 5 people on that stage and some counter programming happening tonight as well. We'll be watching it all. Boyd, good to see you.
Thanks, Marni.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.